Okay guys, now we are going to talk about functions. A function in C is a block of code that performs a specific task which we can usually use more than once in our program. It is very important when you have a specific functionality in your program which you know that you will need to use in more than one area, so you can write all of it as a function in order to reuse in multiple different areas in your program without having to rewrite the same exact lines of code all the time. So this makes your code more reusable and manageable. Obviously, we are going to understand all of this better with the help of some examples. So let's get right into it. Now, let's imagine we have a program, or we are trying to print a specific message in our program in multiple different areas. For example, the message can be something as simple as a greeting, which will be printed in a printf message. So here I have printed a simple message which says, "Hello viewers, I hope you had a good day." Now, let's assume that we have printed this message once in our program, and then after some time, let's say this is not immediately after, but some time after a certain number of lines, we want to print this same message again. So I will normally have to I can just copy this to be faster, and then I'm going to print or paste the same message. And let's say after some time again, we want to happen to print this same message again. I will do the same thing. I will simply paste the same thing the third time. Now we can see here we have our same message which says, "Hello viewers, I hope you had a good day today." And each time we wanted to display this greeting, we had to print this message a new time. So this makes our code very complex and very sophisticated for nothing, because imagine if you had to print something longer than this, you would have to copy, or you would have to retype or copy the same thing over and over. So that is where functions come into play. They enable you to take a part of your code which you know you will use multiple times, and you write it in one place. Then any other place you want to make it happen or visible, you simply call the function to that area. So let's see how we can make this situation better using a function. I will first come at the top of my program before the int main function. Now this int main is already a type of function in C which contains the body of our program. But if you want to define other functions which do other specific things, we will need to create them out of the int main. Now to create a function, we usually come above the int main and we declare the function first. So a function has two main steps, or three main steps rather. The first step is the function declaration. This is when you are creating the function or simply making the function exist in your program. So in order to create the function, we first write the function's return type. The return type of the function is simply the data type of the value the function is going to send as output. Now most of the time we will have a function with a return type, but if we don't want our function to really send out any output, meaning that everything that happens within a function is going to remain only within the function, we can simply give it a return type of void. And later on in this same video, we are going to also see other types of return types for functions, but for now we are going to give void, which is the return type or a keyword you write when you don't want to give your function a specific return type. So I will say void, and then after the return type we give the function name. The name of my function is going to be greet, and you follow this with a set of parentheses. And after the set of parentheses we will write a semicolon. So this is how to declare a function. We have declared a function called greet in our program, but now this function is simply declared, but it doesn't have any body or it doesn't do anything. So in order to give the function a functionality that is known as initializing the function. Initializing the function simply means writing the body of the function or the set of instructions that are found within the function that make the function to actually perform something. For the initialization of the function, we will have to go below the main function. So this is where the main function ends. We will go below this main function and then I will initialize this function here. The initialization of the function requires us to write the function's return type and the name again. So I will rewrite void name with my set of parentheses again, but this time around I will not end this with a semicolon. I will rather follow this with a set of braces, and within the braces now I can write the body of my function, or I can simply write the instructions that make the function to execute something. Now I am going to simply copy this my printf message here, which says hello viewers, I hope you had a good day. So I will copy this message and then I will paste it within my function called greet. Now we have a function called greet which simply sends a greeting to our viewers saying hello viewers, I hope you had a good day. If we go back to our program now, I'm going to cancel everything that is within my main function except the return 0, of course. Now we already have our function greet which we declared and initialized. If we want to send or display this greeting message to our viewers, instead of rewriting the message hello viewers, I hope you had a good day, I will simply call my function greet. So I said the function has 3 main parts. The first part is the declaration, which is simply making the function exist. Then we have the initialization, which deals with defining the body of the function or writing instructions within the function. And lastly, we have the function call. So the function call is when we are actually using the function within our main function. So we initially said at the start of this C crash course that the main function is the part of our C program that contains the body of the program, and everything that is within the body of this program which is within the main function is what is going to be compiled and executed to provide us a result which we are going to see when we run the program. Now if we simply declare a function like void, which we have here, and we initialize it, then we run our program, we are not going to see any result. Let's try it for a matter of fact. Now we see our message is not displayed here. This is because we have simply initialized this function, but we have not called the function within our main function. So in order to make this visible in our program, we will need to write it within the main function. But we are not actually rewriting the whole function, we are simply calling the function. Calling the function, in this case, we are simply going to write the function name. We don't need to write the return type here, so we will simply write greet followed by a set of parentheses and our semicolon, of course, to mark the end of this line. Now this greet is going to call this function which we have initialized called greet also, and whatever is within the body of this function is then going to be executed in our main function. So this our message hello viewers, I hope you had a good day will be displayed in the main function also. And now we can also rewrite this multiple times. So I will simply say greet a second time, and I will copy these 2 lines to paste it so that we will have 2 more greets. Now we see that this is already very more effective, even if we are still copying and pasting, but we have just copied and pasted just the function name, or we have just written the function name multiple times instead of having to rewrite the entire message that was printed by the function. We can see that this is already more efficient. Imagine that we had more than 1 line in this our greet function. Let me add in another line even. So I will print another message apart from this our regular greeting. So I will add another message, stay safe. So we have hello viewers, I hope you had a good day, and then the second message says stay safe. So if we do not use this as a function, or if we do not have this as a function, we will have to rewrite these two messages each time if you want to use them elsewhere in our program. But now that we have declared them within a function, or we have written them within a function, we can simply write the function name and the same things are going to be displayed over and over as many times as we want. So let's run our program now. So we see, hello viewers, I hope you had a good day, stay safe. And let me add a \n at the end of our stay safe to take us to a new line. Okay, now we see, hello viewers, I hope you had a good day and stay safe. The same two messages are displayed 4 times in total. So this is the simplest type of function you can write in C, which is a function with no return type and no parameters. As I already said, a return type is the data type of the value which is being returned by the function. Now I am saying return again. What I mean by return is simply what is taken out of the function once the function is executed. Here we can see that we had our function which simply prints 2 messages. There is nothing that, or there is no particular value that is taken out of this function at the end of the day. Now let's see in a case where we will have a function that needs to return a value. You will see the difference for yourself. I will first cancel this grid here. In fact, let me cancel everything concerning grid. Okay, now I will show another example using a different type of function. Here I want to show you a function which has a return type. So this time around, to start writing the function, we will no more write just void again. We will actually write the return type of our function, which is going to be an int. Meaning that at the end of this our function, we are going to have an integer value that is being taken out of the function, or returned from the function, in other words. So the name of this function this time around is going to be getYear. So it is going to be a function that is going to return the year which we are currently in, or which I am making this video in. After the function name, I will give my parenthesis, of course, and with my semicolon at the end. Now actually, instead of having to declare your function above the main function, then initialize the function below the main function, you can do this in a simpler way by simply declaring and initializing the function at once. We saw with variables, it's possible to declare your variable then initialize it, as well as you can also declare and initialize it at once. That is going to be the same case with functions. We can also declare and initialize them at once, and in order to do that, above the main function cell, instead of first declaring the function then going below the main function to initialize it, I will remove this semicolon, and then right here above the main function, I will write my set of braces. Now within this set of braces, I can simply initialize the function or write the body of this function right here immediately, which is what I will do. So to return a value from a function, we write the return keyword. Then we write what we want to return. So I'm simply going to return the year in which I'm recording this video, which is 2025. And my semicolon at the end. Now note that the value which you are returning must match the return type of your function. We see that 2025 is a whole number, which is an integer, as the return type of the function suggests. So what I mean by return 2025 is that this our function, if we use it in our main function or in the body of our program, the whole of this function is going to sum down to the value 2025. Now let's call this function within the body of our program. I will write the function name getYear, followed by my parenthesis. And then if you run this again, we see that now we don't get any result. This is because in our getYear function, we did not print anything, and when we are calling it within the body of the program, it doesn't still print anything. It's true that we have the value 2025 which is being returned, but it is not being printed. So in that case, if I want this to print, actually I will have to write the function name within a printf message. So I have printf, I am printing year equals %g, and %g is going to be replaced by the getYear function. We are writing %g because getYear has a return type of int, meaning that the value returned from this function is going to be an integer, and that is why we have to write the format specifier for an integer as placeholder here. Now let's run our program to see the result. Now we can see year equals 2025 displayed. We could also decide that before trying to call this function, we save it within another variable in our main function. So I will declare an integer variable called result, and then I will set result to getYear. And then in our printf message, instead of printing getYear again, I can simply access it by writing result. So what we have done is that we are taking the value which is returned by getYear, and then we are saving it directly to another variable in our body called result. And then instead of printing getYear directly, we simply print result. Sometimes it is better to do it this way, because later on in your program you can use this variable result to do other things instead of trying to access getYear function as a whole every single time. Now let's run the program and we will see that we get the same thing. We still see year equals 2025. So far we have seen a function without return type and without parameters. Then we have also seen a function with a return type but without parameters. Now we have to see how to use functions with parameters. So I'm going to cancel my getYear function and everything concerning it. Let's say, for example, we are trying to write a simple program that is going to receive the age of a person and then display a message containing the age of that person. So I can start by first declaring my function, and I'm going to declare and initialize the function at the same time. The return type is going to be given as void because I don't want this function to return anything particular for now. We are simply going to print a message within the function, and it is not going to return any particular value. So the name of my function is going to be display age. Now within the parentheses after the function name, we are going to write a parameter for this function. So what is a parameter? It is simply a value which we are passing into a function, or we are sending into a function from where the function is being called. Now the parameter I am going to pass for this function is going to be the age which we want to include in our message. So the age is going to be an integer, and so in that case I will have to write the data type of the parameter. The parameter is simply just a variable which is being passed to be used inside the function. So we know that in order to declare variables, they need to have data types, and the data type for h is going to be int for my example. So I have int h, and now inside the body of my function I am simply going to display a message that contains the value of this age. So here I'm going to say your age is, and then %d to display the age of the person. And I have to, of course, specify that I am trying to print age. When a value is already passed as a parameter into a function, we don't need to declare this variable in the function again. So we don't need to do something like age again, because once the age is already passed as a parameter, it's already declared directly inside this function. Now within the body of within my main function, I will call this function display age. So I will say display age, I will write the function name, and now we can see that when, or since we are simply printing a message inside this function and it does not return a value, we can write display h and we can simply call the function like this, and it is going to show something when we run the program. But now we see that display h is not complete if we just call it like this. This is because when we declared the function, it took a parameter which is int h. So normally when we are trying to call the function in our main function also, our IDE expects that we pass something that is going to represent this h here, and the value we pass is supposed to be an integer also, because h is declared as an integer as a parameter in this function. So it means if we try to run this program just like this, let me try, we will see it gives an error. This is because we are trying to call the display h function but without passing it any value, whereas the function is declared with a parameter. So in that case, I will need to pass a value for the h. Let me give an h of 12, for example. And then if I run the program, we see that it says your h is 12. So what is happening is that we are calling display h function and we are passing it the value 12. Now when this 12 goes into this function, it is going to replace this h parameter, and wherever h is being used inside the function, it is going to be considered as this value 12. Now when we are calling a function and we are passing it a value that is going to replace the function parameter, in that case we call this value a function argument. So the difference between a parameter and an argument is that the parameter is what is being declared inside the function, while the argument is the value which you pass when calling the function already. You pass an argument in the function call so that the argument is going to replace the parameter inside the function. Now you can also pass or declare a function with multiple parameters, not just one parameter. For example, here we have h. I can simply say comma, and then I will give a double, and then I will say height, for example. Now I have two parameters that are being passed inside this function, h and height. This means in the function call I will need to also pass two arguments. After 12 I will simply write comma, and then I will give a value for the height like 2.5. Also note that the data types of the parameters need to be respected. So if we have an integer parameter, for example, in our function, during the function call we should make sure that the value we are passing is also an integer. Okay, now let us see the last type of functions, which is a function with both return type and parameters. So I want to declare a function which has a return type and which also has parameters. We have already seen a function with a return type and a function with a parameter, but we have not seen a function with both yet. So let's see how a function with both return types and parameters work. I'm going to try to write a function that adds two numbers, or two integer numbers to be precise. So the return type of my function is going to be int. I am giving this function a return type of int because the two numbers I want to add are two integers, and the result, which is going to be the sum of these two numbers, is going to be returned from my function so that I can use this result in my program. So that is why I'm giving it the return type of int, and the function name is going to be add because I want to simply add two numbers. And your function name should generally be a description or should be related to what your function does. So if I'm trying to add two numbers, it makes sense that I should just call my function add, or I could still call it sum if I wanted. So after add, I will write my set of parentheses, and within this parentheses now I will define my function parameters. So the parameters are simply going to be two integers, int a and then int b. So we can see our function has a return type, and now it has parameters, and our parameters happen to be the same data type as our return type. This must not always be the case, but it's just a coincidence here. what is most important about the return type is that the final value which we are returning from the function must be of the return type of this function. And note that you can also return just one thing from a function. You cannot return more than one thing most of the time. So inside my function, I'm simply going to return a plus, I'm simply returning a plus b. Another way I could do this is by first having something like int sum, and then I will say sum equals a plus b. Then I will come here and return sum. But this is a way of doing it, but as you can see, it takes more lines and it can be written in a simpler way. So I prefer to just cancel all of this, and without using any new variable, I will simply return a plus b as such. Now within our main function, we need to call our add function. So I'm going to, since it returns a value which is going to be the summation of a and b, I would like to save this result inside a variable within the main function. And this should also be an integer because the value which we are returning from the function and we want to save in this variable is going to be an integer value. So I will say result, int result is equal to add. I will need to obviously send arguments inside this function call of add. So the arguments I want to send, or the numbers I want to add, are 2 and 3. Now below this, I'm going to now print the result. Okay, now we see we have saved the return value of add into a variable called result, and we are now printing results. So let's run to see the result. We see result equals 5 because the two arguments we sent were 2 and 3, and we know that obviously 2 plus 3 is going to give a result of 5. As I said, this is just one way of doing it. We could also decide we don't want to have a separate variable or a new variable in our program, so we can just cancel all of this whole line, and then instead of printing the result variable, we can simply print the name of the function at once, which is going to be add, and passing in the parameters or passing in the arguments directly, 2 and then 3. Now let's decide that we want to also add some other more numbers. Now I'm going to add 2 different values, which are 10 and 30. And obviously you can keep on adding as many different numbers as you want, but let's just keep it like this for now. And we see our results are 5 and 40. So that is how to use functions with return types and parameters in C. Now let us also see how to use functions with default parameter values, or default parameters for short. A default parameter is simply a parameter that we declare in a function with a default value, as the name says. Like, let's go back to our add example. We are going to have, or let's first of all see in a case where we are trying to use this add without giving the 2 values to be added. So I'm going to say 2, just 2 for example, and I will try to run this. This gives an error because normally our add expects 2 arguments because it has 2 parameters, but we are trying to run it just with 1 argument, which normally calls for an error. But what if we had a default parameter here? We are going to give a default value for our parameter b. So I will set b equals to 10. So this is simply how to give a default parameter. You simply declare the parameter and you set and you write equal to, then you give the value which you want it to be equal to. In this case, even if we try to run the function without passing in two different arguments, it is still going to successfully run because one of the variables already has a default value. So now when we are trying to run add just with one argument, this argument is going to be assumed to be the value for the parameter A, while the parameter B is going to be considered with this default value of 10. So we must not pass a second argument here again. Now let's try to run this, and now we see the result is 12 because it has taken this our 2 that we are passing plus the 10 that was already a default parameter or default value for the parameter called B. But we can still also pass two different parameters. If we pass 2 and 3 like we initially had again, this 3 is going to now replace the value 10. So our compiler is going to understand that we are trying to give a new value for the parameter B. But in case, or just in case, we don't give any value for the parameter B, in that case it is going to take our default parameter, which is 10. We can also make all our parameters to be default even. So A is default to 1 and B is default to 10. This means now I can run my function, or I can call my function with 2 arguments, but if I had 1, I will not give it any argument and it will still be able to run successfully because all its parameters have default values for the case in which we don't pass any value. And we see result is 11 because we have not passed any arguments, but it has simply used all the default values, which are 1 and 10. So guys, that is how to use functions in C. I hope you found this very helpful.